telling me to copy the link. Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar today. Thank you for your patience and sticking with us and finding us where we are. We're going to start in a minute. We'll just give people a chance to find out where we are, and then we will begin. So I'm just going to copy the link into the original. Hopefully people will be able to find us, and we'll get some people joining us. It's working. Right, we now see myself on the screen, which is a bit strange. We'll give people a couple of minutes to join us, and then we will get started. Welcome everyone. I see a couple of people have joined us. Right, I'm going to share my screen and then we'll begin. So thank you very much everybody for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have people here. So today is all about just one question that I guess asked a lot by clients, by charities I work with is, well, how's everyone else doing? How are the results? How's face-to-face performing? How's telephone? How's digital? So what I thought would be really helpful and useful for people is to try and get a sense of where we are in the market at the minute. And we're going to run through by channel and give you some macro trends that will hopefully give you an idea of where you are and how you're performing. Please do add questions to the chat. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll get on with things in a minute. So my name's Craig Linton. I'm an individual giving consultant and trainer and work with lots of charities around strategy, audits, campaign development, support journeys and experience. So I'm trying to bring all that knowledge in and share some of that with you today. So I hope you find it useful. I'm also delighted today to be joined by my friend and colleague, Jenny Crabtree, also has a wealth of experience, and she's going to share some of her background and what she's learned over the last year around acquisition. And I'll pass over to Jenny now to get going and give you some of the big macro trends that we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Thanks, Craig, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on what's probably lunchtime for some of you today. So, as Craig mentioned, I'm going to kick off the session by looking at some of the macro trends, and then we'll go into different channels in a little bit more depth. And if you've got questions at any point, do feel free to let us know in the chat. So I'll launch straight in, basically. Looking at the media landscape, of course, 2020 and COVID meant everything changed. There was a huge shift in the way that people consumed media, and for us as charity fundraisers, that had all sorts of implications. You know, we went into lockdown, people were at home. We never used to spend that much time at home. Even when we did go out, we couldn't do things like spend cash. Lots of places went cashless, and you started to tap your card more frequently. We lived online, we shopped online, we saw our friends online, we socialized online. These were huge, huge changes, and we were all living through them as human beings, but at the same time as fundraisers, thinking, oh my goodness, what do I do? I'm suddenly working from home and I need to acquire supporters and help. So it was crazy, crazy times. Thankfully, that has now settled down as we've gone into 2021, and many of the media channels that were affected have come back. Some of them with slightly different adaptations, and that's what we'll look at over the course of this session. Online has been a huge thing. as there's a Barb report that has a stat that really makes me smile. In 2020, Craig, we're on the previous slide. In 2020, the amount of time online grew from 40 minutes per person per day to 5 hours, 16 minutes per person per day, which is a huge, huge increase. As fundraisers, many of us are used to using face-to-face, door-to-door and private site. That had to stop last year, but thankfully this year it's come back. It's changed and a bit different, and we'll go into that in more detail later on, but it is back. And in the printed world, readership shifted between titles, things that we all used to read every day, like the Metro, the Evening Standard on our commute in and out. Nobody was commuting, well, very few people were commuting, so their readership dropped significantly. So there were loads of changes that happened last year. And looking at global levels of ad spend, the World Advertising Research Council saw the biggest drop in global ad spend in 2020 than it has ever done in its 40 years of market monitoring. Pleasingly to say, that has now changed and growth is being seen worldwide, and that has continued into 2021 and is anticipated to continue into 2022. But with this huge shift in the global media landscape, digital became a really big part of our media that we consumed and that we as fundraisers were using to recruit new donors. And the spend on media significantly increased. And there's a really interesting report by Enthuse that talks about 40% of the public not having made a cash donation to charity since before the pandemic started. And their research says that this has had a huge impact on how people plan to give in future, with a quarter of the public wanting to use cash in future, and the majority, 51%, now choosing to give online as their preferred route. And I know that many of the charities that I work with have seen that trend in the number of online donations that they have been getting, and that has been increasing, indicating that consumers that we might have previously thought didn't want to give online are indeed happy to do that way. And quite frankly, if my mom can get used to online banking, then that's a real indication that change is happening out there in the wider world. And so digital marketing became a thing that we all started to do a lot more of last year. As a sector, we've never been at the forefront of it. And at the time, I was working with Salvation Army, and they worked with their digital agency Manifesto to do a pretty sizable digital campaign. And it was quite unprecedented times because nobody really had a strategy. It was like the rulebook had been ripped up. So they worked with Manifesto to acquire donors across Facebook, Google, Bing, using their Google grant and paid Google ads. We tested copy, we tested imagery, we tested videos, and we learned as we went. There was just so much change, regularly refreshing, looking, watching the stats, adapting as we saw stuff, adapting to what was going on in the wider world. What were the bigger conversations that were happening? What were we part of? And over 3 months, the campaign adjusted and adapted frequently. And we brought in the learnings as we went, and it brought in a return on ad spend of 7-1 during those 3 months that it was live. So it was really interesting to be part of that and to show that you could acquire a decent volume of donors at such a good return through digital channels. So next slide, please, Craig. Is it coming? Yes. So consumer behaviour has shifted, and people are spending more time and are more comfortable in a digital space. Outside of the digital world, though, behaviour has also shifted. One thing that we all did last year when we all got locked down was start to watch a lot of television. And a lot more subscription video on demand, which is what the VOD is in there, increased. Barb report that now more than 17 million households have got at least one subscription video on demand service. So it might be Netflix, Disney Plus, there's so many out there to choose from. but that figure of 17 million is up by more than 3 million households since Q3 of 2019. And that's partly been driven by new entrants into the market, and that has been a significant shift in that landscape. As part of this, media houses are adapting the way they work and innovating to try and retain their precious advertising spend against a competing digital spend going through in there. And another thing that has been really important to us as fundraisers this year has been the increased time and money spent on social media channels. And there's some really interesting research that looks at the increase of time people are spending on social media. But I would tread carefully if you start to look at it, because, for example, TikTok apparently accounted for 3.5% of all video time in 2020. But when you really look at the age breakdown of that, there's a much higher percentage for the younger audiences, where it lifts to over 9%. But that's really interesting because TikTok users spent the second largest amount of money on in-app purchases last year, which is quite interesting. So it's showing there's a real trend for people happy to transact within that social media channel. And as with many things, what's happening on one channel, you often see spread out into other channels as well. In 2021, many of you will know that public fundraising has restarted again, thank the Lord. We are now seeing events happening. It's wonderful. We are now seeing face-to-face fundraisers back on our high streets, which is amazing. And although we've had to adapt, and again, we'll look at some of those adaptations later on, it is great to see fundraisers out on the streets talking to the British public about causes that they both care about. And so there's been a lot of innovation. I'm sure many of you, like me, will see numerous products and ads as a consumer yourself. For example, I get served loads of run, a mile every day in September, walk 10,000 steps every day in September. Those virtual events were something that came out of the pandemic, and lots of charities trialed them, tested them, saw them to work. And I know clients that I'm working with at the minute are now looking at running them in parallel to their in-person events, which is quite a good backup, to be honest. Should anything happen, and it mean we can't do that in-person event, we've always got the virtual one that is running as well, so we can shift participants across to a virtual option. And indeed, that's what London Marathon are doing in October this year. They've got 50,000 people running the streets of London and 50,000 people doing it their own way in their own neighbourhood. So this innovation has been somewhat forced, but it's a trend that I think will continue, particularly in the digital space. So yes, that's the next slide, please, Craig. So whilst all this innovation is great, and particularly in the digital space, there is a bit of a warning flag coming in that it's not all going to stay and be wonderful. There is a huge push on privacy in the digital space. Safari and Firefox have already blocked third-party cookies by default, and Google is set to follow suit in 2022, which is causing huge concern for digital marketers, not just in charities, but across it's worldwide, across all brands within and beyond our sector. Apple has got a big push for privacy as well. iOS 14 requires opt-in to app tracking. iOS 15 will reduce our ability to track emails. So if you aren't aware of these and you aren't already working with your digital teams, please go and talk to them. There's a lot of work that we need to get our heads around as digital marketers. Things like looking at increasing your first-party data, so people who have actively opted in and consented to you contacting them directly is a possible solution. Looking at how multiple channels can work together to increase relevance and awareness, and re-looking at things like contextual advertising. Where are your supporters online, and where would it be relevant for them to see you and your adverts? And looking at in-platform experiences. Some of these Facebook challenges are a really good example where actually your participant remains wholly in Facebook. You don't send them off to your charity website. The whole thing is happening in Facebook. So there's lots of change that will happen as we go through the rest of 21 and 2022 in the digital space, which is caused by these underlying changes. Alongside this, there are indications that perhaps some of the offline old school media channels have a role to play in boosting our online performance. You know, channels like Door Drops are still performing well for some charities. Others are testing partially addressed mail, or PAM, as you may see it referred to. And these are designed to support and increase online activity and attract new donors. But ultimately, your choice of channels will boil down to your ability to invest, what your fundraising strategy is in the short, medium, and long term, and the tools and skills that you have at your disposal. But ultimately, we are still fundraisers. It doesn't matter what the channel is. It's our ability to enable someone to help something or somebody that they care about using the power of stories and the increasing power of data that will really, really help all charities to acquire new supporters. There isn't one size fits all. I can't give you the magic solution in the next however many minutes we've got, but if you're willing to test, learn, and keep using those insights, then there's definitely the opportunity to engage relevant audiences for your cause. So that's some of the macro trends. We'll now hand over to Craig, who will start off by looking at digital in a little bit more detail.
Thanks, Jenny. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a closer look at some of the data. And we've spoken to some of our favourite agencies and consultants that we work with or just really like, and they've been incredibly helpful and incredibly generous with their time and with sharing what they've found is happening currently. So if we look at digital, our friends at Rally, Paul at Rally, very kindly give us permission to share some of the headlines from their 2021 benchmarks report. You know, because of COVID, because of lockdown, there's been a huge jump in online revenue, as we'll show in a minute. Jenny's talked about the privacy concerns and how that might be impacting results. I think it's important to think about when we're talking about digital, there's probably three areas for acquisition. There's lead gen, and then converting those on a digital journey or via telephone, which we'll talk about shortly. There's obviously straight cash gift, and then straight to regular. All have their pros and cons. We probably won't go into those in detail today, but when we look at the data, it's just interesting to compare the different parts of this. So the first bit we're going to look at is just that change in online revenue. And the benchmarks report showed that the participating charities reported a 35% increase in online revenue in 2020-21. And unsurprisingly, hunger poverty causes were especially impacted with COVID in a positive way for their income. Though obviously that was going straight out the door in terms of support and help that they were giving to their beneficiaries. So you can see, you know, from being a relatively small part of the acquisition mix, you know, now digital over the last year has actually become one of the key streams and one of the key channels that you need to do and look at. So one of the things that was interesting is just looking, well, what is that average gift? And actually, what was interesting to us is there was almost a 10% drop in average gift, cash gifts, but people were giving a lot more and there was more people giving. So the average gift may have gone down to £49, but actually the increase in numbers more than made up for that. And there was a lot more people giving generally. You can see some of the different sectors that performed particularly highly. So again, that hunger poverty was driven by a higher average gift as well as more people giving, whereas the smallest average gift is wildlife, animal welfare. And I would guess that is because people given to a lot of charities in that space, you know, people give who are really passionate about animal welfare and wildlife, will probably support 5 to 10 different causes. In terms of an average gift, there's a slight increase, which is great. And again, you can see the differences in average monthly amount by different sectors and size of charities. So interestingly, on that, it's the small charities who've got the highest average regular gift, which I think is quite interesting and significantly larger than the sort of medium and large size charities. So sometimes you often get small charities complain, oh, we can't do what big charities do, and big charities complain, well, we don't have the flexibility in space of small charities. And this is a way, an example of small charities maybe outperforming bigger organizations in terms of average gifts for regular giving. So if we look at the share of budget, I thought this was quite interesting. Just, where are people putting their digital budgets? And, round about 60%, so £6 out of every 10 spent on digital fundraising is going into social media. And I suspect a high percentage of that is going into Facebook. Reasonable amount into search, only about 10% into display and other channels and video. I expect video to grow significantly in the next year or two, and it'll be interesting to watch that space as YouTube improve their tools. So most people tend to be spending on Facebook ads, is what the data is telling us. And one thing again that always asks is, what does it cost to get a donation? And again, it's interesting to see display is very ineffective, over £400 a donation, but that might be being used for other things like awareness and driving traffic as well. Search doing very well. Things like emergencies, and you see something on the telly, something's happened, you might look in, I don't know, Haiti earthquake, and you want to donate. Search is very powerful for those sorts of emergency responses. Social media, so that'd be typical Facebook ads, and then donate, costing about £30. This doesn't necessarily include all the on costs and everything, so just be wary. If you've got a figure of 60 and you think, oh God, they're doing it at 30, there's lots of different factors that go into this. This is just to give you a flavour of what the data is saying these costs are, and they do vary hugely from cause to cause. What I thought was really interesting on the right-hand side is the cost per digital lead. Again, people ask, how much does it cost to get a lead? Again, it depends on the cause, the campaign. Trying to get someone to sign a petition and just giving their name and email will be a lot cheaper, but not necessarily more cost effective in the long run for conversion than getting somebody to give you their phone number. So what I like about this is what they've done is put the 25th and 75th percentile. And what we'd say is, if you're in somewhere between the 25th and 75th, then you're probably in the right ballpark in terms of lead gen and costs. So you can see in the UK, we're saying it's going to cost somewhere between £1 and £6 for a lead. So it'd be interesting to see how you do, and do let us know in the chat if you've got any results. There's always great to hear of anyone who's doing better than that significantly, or does that ring true to you? Are you seeing anything different? Email is also a big part of digital. And again, I just thought this was interesting because one of the questions I get a lot from clients is, should we be emailing more? Do we email too much? I mean, my answer is always, if it's interesting and it's relevant and it's quality, then absolutely email. Chances are you're under emailing, but it needs to have that focus on great content. So you can see, compared to the US, we massively under email. We send 28 messages a year, where our colleagues in America are sending more like 70. So you probably can email more, but making sure that you're segmenting your data, you're personalizing your messages, and you're making it relevant to the audience and really inspiring. So again, you can see that rights charities are sending much more emails than people in the health or wildlife space. Some only getting 4 fundraising asks per year via email, which to me feels really low. And I'm sure there's chances to uplift that. And that probably comes through onto the next slide, where you look at email revenue per 1,000 supporters. And again, you can see it's interesting, right, to send a lot of emails, but they're probably around petitions and advocacy. So they probably more interested in getting that wealth of support for the campaigns they're running. Whereas we know wildlife and animal aren't sending a lot of fundraising emails, so that probably reflected in that. Whereas health and disaster and aid, you know, as you'd expect, their focus is more on fundraising. So, and again, during lockdown, health is going to be doing particularly well. So it's quite interesting to see that per 1,000 subscribers, charities at the top here are getting over £300, and then the lowest performers are well under 100. So again, it's an interesting metric to take a look at your own performance. It's quite a blunt instrument, but it's hopefully interesting nonetheless. So that's some of the digital streams, and giving you a flavour for where you are. Thanks for the questions in the chat. We'll come back to them in due course. We see there from Redina about digital new normal. I think it's part of the new normal. It needs to become central. You know, people talk about integration, and integration's been a buzzword for many years in fundraising. But now more than ever, you need to combine your digital with your offline and other channels like telephone, which takes us neatly on to trends in telephone fundraising this year. And this comes from our friends at Unity 4. So a big thank you to Steve and Jack, who spent about half an hour talking me through some of the trends and some of the things they're seeing from clients this year. So they typically, on an acquisition point of view, they're using lead gen to convert people to direct debits or for lottery. And lottery, we haven't mentioned that in the digital space, but again, you see we're seeing a lot of success, and a lot of the best results we're seeing is around lottery, digital, DRTV and telephone, so across the range of things. One thing that I thought was interesting is this move and shift that they recommend at Unity 4 to more open asks. So the classic £15, £10, £5 is the final drop ask. They're finding that's not working in the same way it used to. People give much more generously, and the retention's better when you have more of a dialogue and almost like a negotiation. And you're asking, you know, what amount would you feel comfortable with? You know, would £10 a month be okay? Okay, no, would 7 work? So being a lot more collaborative with the person you're speaking to, rather than this old school hard style ask. Some of their clients still asking for that, but they're seeing better results from this open asks and doing things this way. Typically over the phone, for DD, they're seeing an average monthly gift of around £6.50 to £7. And what they found is, well, over the last year, you have to be much more flexible with your scripts. You can't just have one script that lasts you for 2-3 years. You know, they've had to reflect it for different phases of COVID, different scripts at the start of lockdown versus the end, you know, when people different levels of fatigue and trying circumstances, putting more empathy in to see how people are doing, etc. So really changing those scripts to reflect the mood of the nation. Lottery, you know, how much is it costing? So this is including the lead gen. So you saw some of the lead gen costs earlier that we're seeing in the sector. And they're saying we're all in, telephone, lead gen, follow-up, etc., seen around about £40 to £75 per sign-up. And they're finding that leads from co-registration sources, so these are things where you might tick on a consent box, I'm happy for partners to contact me, third parties to contact me. So people who tick those boxes, and amazingly some people do, which always surprises me, but that data and that co-registration data is what's performing best for lottery. Whereas for more altruistic straight to direct debit, social media, Facebook leads tend to work better and more cost effective. Typically costing £80 to £120 per sign up, but said some of their bigger clients, large clients, they're happy up to about £150 including the call costs and data processing. So again, if your manager's under pressure, why is it costing us £100 for a sign up? Well, actually, you know, some people are paying £150 and very happy with that, and their long-term LTV supports that. So make sure that you're looking and thinking about the ultimate return on the investment in your break-even points. And again, as we said, the average gift is £6.50 to £7. And the final thing, I think, I know we're talking about acquisition today, but with all of this is don't forget the stewardship. And, you know, Jax and Steve at Uni4, they really have seen an increase in stewardship calls and the benefits of that in terms of lifetime value and retention. So make sure that with whatever budget you're doing and whatever money spend you're putting into telephone acquisition and conversion, you're also budgeting for stewardship, so you keep the people that you recruit. So we're exactly at 1:30, which is great because we're halfway through. And just welcome Jenny back. I'll just see if there's been any more questions while we're talking. There hasn't been. So we're gonna just have a quick break, and we're just going to tell you about a couple of things that we've got coming up that you may find of interest. So one of the reasons we've been putting this together is that every year I run a 6-month masterclass with Rob Woods and Bright Spot Fundraising. Delighted that Jenny is one of the coaches on this course, and it's a 6-month sort of immersion into IG and really help you to master it. So if you've got anyone in your team or you're relatively new to IG, typically between 0 and 10 years experience, people have found a lot of benefit from the course, then there's a link there to find out more. We'd love to have a chat to you about it if that's of interest. The second thing, Jenny has been busy and squirreling away and has developed an on-demand training course to acquisition. She's going to guide you through step by step into developing an acquisition plan that works. That's available from early next week. There's a special discount code that we'll send out to you if that's of interest to you or your team. And Jenny, I know you've put a lot of work and effort into that. What can people expect from the course before we continue and get on with the rest of the content around direct marketing and around DRTV and other streams?
Yeah, it's a course really designed for probably smaller or medium-sized charities to really help you know how to acquire new supporters and thinking quite strategically about it, because I know when I've set up new strategies before, there's so much you can do. It's a little bit overwhelming sometimes to be, where do I start? What should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do the other? And as a sector, one of the things I adore about it is the fact we share so much stuff. But sometimes, again, that just adds to that overwhelming feeling of, oh, they're doing that, and there's a subscription box over there that everyone's talking about. Should we do that? It just will help you distill through those thoughts and like what's right for this charity, what's right for us, and keep that focus. So yeah, if anybody wants to chat, do give me a shout. Happy to give you a bit more insight.
Well, thanks, Jenny, and really looking forward to launching that course next week. So good stuff. So back to our acquisition. Let's take a quick look at direct marketing acquisition. And we're very grateful to colleagues at DM Focus. They do a lot of great work around inserts, around partially addressed mail, and other cold printed acquisition methods. GDPR had a big impact. There's been tax implications that made it more expensive, certainly for old school addressed buying lists, as we may have done 15, 20 years ago when I started in fundraising. But it's actually seen quite a resurgence, certainly in the insert space over the last couple of years. And obviously, again, during COVID, couldn't do things face to face. So there has been, well, what can we spend our money on? Well, people are at home, people are actually quite captive audience. So inserts, etc., have seen a bit of a resurgence. And with a number of charities who used to do this and then maybe have backed away because of GDPR concerns, have now thrown themselves back into this type of fundraising. And this means, like everything, the availability has seen a squeeze. That's been one of the big trends this year that Cameron and the team at DM Focus have told us about, is the best performing magazines. And these might be things like the Oldie, Church of England Times, and Guardian on a weekend, Waitrose magazines. There's a lot of demand for space and for inserts in those at the minute. Seen incredibly strong results. I know from personal experience with some hospices I work with and with hospitals that I've worked with, that I've seen the strongest and best results in my career from inserts and door drops over the last 18 months. There's some signs of that just starting to drop away a little bit, but because people have been at home a bit more, some people who maybe have been doing okay they've kept the job, they haven't been furloughed, they've been incredibly generous to the appeals that have come through their letterbox, and seeing some really strong results. And these are reflected in this table here that they've given us, where again for direct mail you can see some of the best performing overseas direct mail has had a year one ROI of almost 0.66 off your first gift, which is great. That's going to be making money within a year, which is very good for cold direct mail. In terms of the inserts, you'll see again a wide range of responses. Those poor campaigners again seeing quite high numbers, but you can see medical again absolutely doing brilliant during lockdown. Almost breaking even year one on an insert, which is really good. And I've worked on campaigns that have made money on acquisition in the last 18 months, which is a first in 20 years. So which has been lovely. But obviously, again, it's about the supporter journey as well, and the ongoing conversion as well. So hope that is helpful. There's definitely a space and a role for this. Tends to be really good quality donors, tend to stick around a long time if you get your journeys right. Often very good legacy prospects as well, in terms of the age profile and things. So don't discount inserts, door drops, etc., because they are still performing really well. So thanks for the questions in the chat. So Tim, agency you sell lead gen? Yeah, absolutely. I can send you some details. I'm just about to do a campaign with someone who do that. It can be hard. Some don't guarantee, and they might guarantee the cost per lead, but the cost per telephone conversion might have to be variable. But they are usually manageable within a range, and you can normally put a cap on it that says if it goes above that, we stop. But yeah, you're right. It is difficult sometimes to get that balance. You might think you've got the leads working really well, really cost effectively, but then they go on the telephone and they're just not very good leads for telephone. And then vice versa, the leads that are working really well for telephone are really expensive to get the right people through your lead gen efforts. So it can be a bit of a balancing act. And one of the things I didn't mention from my conversation with Steve and Jax at Unity 4 is they recommend starting slow, small numbers, test, learn, refine, and slowly build up until you have a high performing campaign that is meeting your cost per acquisition targets. Sarah, yeah, we'll send a link through when we send the slides and the video after this is over. You'll get something tomorrow with all that information in it. So that's direct marketing. I'm going to hand back over to Jenny, who's going to talk a little bit about face-to-face and DRTV. Back over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Craig. So first of all, to say when I talk about face-to-face, I mean face-to-face including street, door-to-door and private site, but rather than repeat myself 3 times, I'm just going to call it all face-to-face. This was obviously a channel which had to stop during lockdown, but has since come back, and I'm a huge fan of face-to-face. It was behind the significant growth that I led at Battersea when I was there, so I think it's a great channel and know firsthand how well it can work. I'm delighted to say that what we've seen since restarting is that the public have responded really well. They're happy to talk to fundraisers, which is amazing. And we have put in COVID measures to keep everybody safe. And again, that has been appreciated by the public on the street. One key challenge that we are seeing at the minute, though, is a lot of the agencies are finding it difficult to get good staff out there. There's a really competitive job market. And of course, the people that you are talking to is such a crucial part of the experience for the supporter. So we do want good people and we do want quality fundraisers out there representing our cause. But I know a client that I'm with at the minute is looking at, when can we get back out to market? And the agency's saying not yet because we haven't got enough staff. So that is a challenge that is being experienced. Generally, people are seeing higher average gifts and good attrition since restarting, which is great. There are some challenges on private sites where some of those are being a little bit slow, especially on the indoors. But again, a client that I'm with at the minute, what we're doing is trying to have a real mix in our face-to-face portfolio. So we've got different products, we've got lottery asks, sponsorship asks, regular giving asks. We're doing door, we're doing private site, just trying to balance our risk so that if one starts to struggle in terms of volume, we can increase and upweight in another area. But hopefully, the sounds we're getting from agencies is that we're expecting our volumes to grow in the coming years, and they're working their socks off to recruit some great fundraisers for us. Next slide, please, Craig. Cost-wise, we are similar to where we were pre-COVID, but of course, the real benefit of these channels is the payment by results model. So you only pay for the people that you sign up. It can get a bit complex when you're having to work out rebates and some of those pricing models, but typically you can be talking between 120 to 144 pounds plus VAT for an £8 per month direct debit. Lottery is cheaper than that, depending on the number of lottery lines that a supporter takes out, and that can be between 50 and 70 pounds per week. But with all of these channels, you've got your fixed cost that you pay, and then attrition. It is, of all the media channels, typically quite high in attrition. So you do need to measure those long-term ROIs in there and make sure they're acceptable for you. One thing that we're just looking to test with a client is a shift away from direct debits to actually testing recurring card payments on the door. Which is really interesting. I've not done it before, and I'm really interested to see how that goes. What it means is that actually when the fundraiser is talking to the supporter, they can take that card payment there and then. So that initial gift, you've got it, which takes out a big chunk of your attrition piece. So it'd be really interesting to see how that's going. And I know there are some charities already doing that who are getting good results from it. So fingers crossed. I'll be really interested to see how that goes. So back to face-to-face fundraising, and I would like to say a huge thank you to our friends at Brightvox, can't get my words out today, for helping us and sharing their insight with us across there. Looking now at DRTV, and I'm just going to whiz across through this because I'm conscious of time. This, of course, was significantly affected by lockdown during 2020, and there were huge changes to the marketplace. It's come back in 2021, and over the next few slides, we'll just have a little look at some of those changes in a bit more depth. And I would like to say a huge thank you to friends at Media Lab for sharing their insight with us on this one. So as you can see here, there was a huge opportunity that some charities took advantage of last year. You can see this first spike here. There was a real increase in the number of charities testing DRTV activity in around April, May, June time last year, although interestingly the spend isn't as significantly up, indicating that actually there were more charities trying small campaigns. And this is because at that time, remember, everybody was stuck in at home. The number of people watching television was significantly higher, but a lot of the big advertisers pulled out, meaning the supply and demand was totally upended. And I know charities that I was working with at the time started to say, should we test this? We haven't done it before. Let's try it. Let's get an emergency ad out. Let's cobble together something really quickly. And bless them, some of the agencies that were doing the creatives were turning stuff around in incredible time to get stuff out the door. And some of it worked. Some great results came through. The ROIs were helped by the really low media costs that we saw there, but the results were strong. And whilst you look towards the latter half of this graph, you can see that actually spend had a little peak around Christmas, which is perfectly normal. As we've gone into 2021, it's sort of similar, 15 million for all charity TV spend in there, but the total number of people advertising, charities that is, has flattened off at around 45 in June, July and August. So what that tells us is that some results have declined and people have pulled out, but some are seeing it working. So they've increased their spend in there, and that's certainly the case for a client that I'm with at the minute. They tested 3 different ads in the spring of 2020, and now they're just running with 1 because the results just dropped. So if we go to the next slide, please. Some of the reason behind that is when we dig into the consumer trends behind it. This is showing the GfK Consumer Confidence Index, and what this is, it's a frequent snapshot into people's perceptions of things like how much money they're going to be spending. Is now the time to do a big purchase? It's really fascinating for the data geeks out there. Go and have a read. It's really interesting. There's a link on the bottom of the slides. But what this is telling us is that consumer confidence over the past 18 months has risen from the lows of -34 back down in April, and actually a high in July last month of -7, although that's dropped back a little bit now. And the longer term forecasting on this anticipate us to reach about -6 by the end of this year, but 2022 to be much better at only -2 points. So the research is showing that consumers are largely positive, which is a great thing, but some of the other research that they do to complement this indicates that actually there might be a shift into consumers starting to save instead of spend. And the reason I'm telling you this is that this is likely to impact on the TV pricing that we see. The market that we're in at the minute is very inflationary because demand is exceeding supply. At the start of this year, demand started to settle down and viewing levels decreased because people returned to work. People that had pulled out of the advertising space last year went back in. So prices have returned to around the 2019 levels. We're really expecting a very, very competitive Christmas period this year. Retailers have got a lot of catching up to do, so they're expected to be out there. Charities, are always Christmas. We're fundraisers. We know about Christmas and it's a good time. So yes, it's expected to be very, very busy and competitive out there. And as we look into 2022, we're expecting to see some of those prices carrying forwards. So we could see the market return to being something that really only the big charities can afford and get to work. But interestingly, again, if you look into the granularity in there, no, next slide, please, Craig. If you look at the gaming TV market in particular, you can see here, as these slides track, the performance, there's been disruption at this granular level with Amaze coming in. These are the people where you can pay, I think it's £10, and you could win £1 million house draw in Devon. That always looks amazing, and I really will enter one day. That their spend in the August 2021 slide on here is significant. It's about 2.3 million pounds. That's huge. And interestingly, what we've seen is that some charity brands have seen a reducing performance in their lottery DRTV activity, and it could be because of this disruption with Amaze. And I know there are other similar firms trying to enter the UK marketplace. So it'll be really interesting to see how that pans out over 2022 at that granular level of detail. And then the final slide on TV just looks at pricing, which tells us a really interesting story. Regular giving has been a year of two halves, quite honestly. When June hit and lockdown was finally lifted, we saw a dip in response rates, and some charities who'd been tracking fairly steady started to see a decline kicking in. Lottery, we've talked around, entry of Amaze into the market has had a little bit of disruption, and they've seen results start to drop down in there. Interesting Legacies has been a really, really strong performer. I know it looks really expensive of a CPA of between £250 and £300, but when you consider that a typical legacy gift can be 4, 5, 6 figures, even for tiny charities, then that actually does have a very strong ROI. And so legacy marketing, I'm sure you all have seen the recent report about the predicted boom in legacy fundraising. So really do make sure you've got some legacy marketing going on. And then finally, subscriptions. I mentioned these earlier on. It is competitive. Some charities are getting it to work, and it's the products where they're really audience-led that are managing to get some decent returns on that one. So that's it for DRTV. I'm very conscious we've got 10 minutes left. So what does all this mean? I think the biggest conclusions that stand out to me is that all charities need to keep an eye on consumer behaviour and the wider marketplace. It's really easy to just get your head down and get stuck in. Time is busy. I know what it's like. I'm with you in that you just sometimes think, I don't have time to know about this stuff, but you need to, because actually, if you know what's going on in the wider world and with the wider consumers, then you can help your charity respond to that. And flexibility is a really critical part of that, whether that be in an event space of moving from a hybrid event to purely virtual, or whether that be ramping up some digital activity if face-to-face has to stop again because we're in another lockdown. It's really critical to keep your eye on the game and make sure that you respond. At the same time, and I say this because I'm a big fan of data, use your data. Number one rule, look at it, find out what it's telling you, listen to it, respond to what it is telling you. Don't just ignore it and put it in a database and never look at it ever again. It's really going to help you. And there's an interesting example from RSPCA where they noticed that 25% of their donations were coming from mobile devices and apps. So if any of you saw their Christmas 2020 activity, you'll notice that included messaging around, did you know you can pay with Apple Pay? And it was their data analysis that told them that, and they got brilliant results in 2020 by people paying through Apple Pay because they told them they could on their adverts. And so get those tests out there. If you see an indication in your data, go ahead, test it, refine it, learn from it, grow from it. That will keep you in a strong position going forwards. Because as Craig mentioned earlier, I know a lot of the charities I work with saw phenomenal results during 2020 and the earlier parts of 2021, but we're starting to get a little bit of a decrease coming through in some places now. So we, as fundraisers, we need to make sure that we act on that. And a key part of doing that is not just acquiring them, but actually showing them the impact that their donations are making, showing them the difference that loyalty has meant to you in your organisation, and that retention piece is just as important as the acquisition. And unless there's anything else Craig would add to that, then I think we are done. I'm ready for questions.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Jenny. Just to say, we put links to various bits and pieces in the at the end of the slide deck. We'll be sending a link back to the recording to everyone. If you do have any questions, put them in the chat now. It'd be really good to hear from you. I mean, one thing that surprised me, Jenny, and I hadn't been aware of, I've seen lots of these Amaze ads on telly. I had no idea they were spending £2 million a month on those. I mean, I thought that was incredible in terms of spend, and you know, a little bit sort of like, oh wow, that is a lot.
It's out of reach for a lot of charities, 2 million.
It is, and it can get a little bit scary. But I've got a couple of tiny charity clients, and they're spending couple of £100 a month on Facebook ads, but they've got just a really good conversion email journey and regular gift ask and product that actually just brings in 3 or 4 regular givers on a ongoing basis, and actually they're growing their program. And I've got one client just following that strategy has gone from £1,000 a month in regular givers to £5,000 a month in regular givers over sort of a 3-4 year period, just through that constant learning and small budgets and testing and rolling out. So we've got a question from Leah saying, with the DRTV benchmarks, cost per acquisition, anything for cash asks? So, or does everything, I'm guessing, Leah, you mean that people text a £5 and then they get a call and do it, or do you mean one-off gifts to emergencies? Was there anything from Media Lab around that?
Well, I know that a lot of charities did really, really well in lockdown with emergency one-off cash asks. And the client that I'm working with at the minute, we are doing a regular gift ask where it is literally text, blah, 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 for £2, £3 a month. So both are working. I have seen a decline in the number of cash asks, but if you're doing a cash ask, you're always going to need to do that conversion part of the journey in there. It's just crucial. Otherwise, the numbers will really struggle to stack up for you.
Yeah. Thanks, Joel. Nice to see your name popping up. Glad that it's been useful. Thanks, Paul, as well, and Sarah as well. Another nice to hear a familiar name. And then from Amala Vaj, never clarified supporter journey. Can you direct us to any help with that? This is going to sound like a little bit of, so we do run a course on supporter journeys and creating supporter journeys that work. Myself and Jenny have both spend a lot of time working with clients on their supporter journey. So drop us an email and we'll certainly be able to point you in the right direction and send you some free resources that you might find useful and help you get started on that. It's absolutely crucial that you're not just getting supporters in, that you're looking after them, giving them a great experience, wowing them, and really inspiring that loyalty and commitment and things that we know drive lifetime value. So yeah, do get in touch. Respond to the email that we'll send tomorrow with all the information on, and we'll do our best to help. So I think that's all the comments and questions. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for everyone for finding us. We did a test run through, and I think that scuppered the original live feed, but fundraisers are a resourceful bunch, and thank you for finding the link and joining us today. Hope you have a great rest of the day. Good luck with all your fundraising, and thanks for watching. And anything, Jenny, you'd like to say to finish off?
No, just thank you very much. I hope you all found it useful, and look forward to hearing lots of success stories from people who are following some of the tips in here.
Right, thanks everyone. Oh, I've just seen Lay's just come back with another question, so we'll squeeze that in, seeing as we've got the 2 minutes. Have you seen anything work really well from the conversion from cash to RG in DRTV? Do particular times or channels work? I don't have anything off the top of my head. I know obviously the media buying is so important with DRTV, and it's not, you don't want the prime time during Coronation Street slots. It's the ITV for afternoon thing. It's Dave on a Tuesday evening. It's all time. It's the off-peak, low audience channels that tend to work best. I know Media Lab do have things on time of day, so maybe that if you drop us a line, maybe that's something we'll ask, and we'll try and get an answer for you. I don't have anything to hand.
Don't have it to hand, no, but from experience, it is around, as you say, the cheaper channels, the day parts, the programming, and then getting those follow-up calls in quickly. that is really, really critical, and making sure that you're able to answer. If you're asking people to call, you've got enough call centre staff there to answer the calls when they come in. That's also really critical. But yeah, happy to chat to Media Lab and see if they've got any proper analysis rather than just stuff I've seen.
Yeah, that reminds me of a horror story of a charity that I heard of. I won't name them, who had a brand new DRTV ad going live. Really proud of it. Got an amazing response, but it went live on a Saturday, and they forgot to tell the call centre, and there was nobody there to answer the phone, and they missed thousands of missed calls. So don't do that. That's definitely a tip. But anyway, thanks everyone. Thanks for the comments. Lovely to hear from you all, and thanks for watching. Take care. Bye everyone.